Some other developments in Windows 11 that we should be aware of. Windows 11 by default installs Microsoft Edge as the default web browser. Now, Edge has undergone somewhat of an evolution over the past several years. It is now based on the Chromium platform, which is the same platform that is used by Google with Chrome and also by Opera. So you will necessarily see some similarities between Edge and Chrome and Opera for that very reason. That is, they're all built on the same platform. It is also noteworthy to mention, or it is noteworthy, I should say, and I should mention, that Edge did indeed replace Internet Explorer, of course, which Microsoft retired back in June of 2022. Internet Explorer is just simply not available from Microsoft anymore. It is no longer supported. If you're still running it, I would encourage you to get to another browser. Maybe that's Edge, maybe that's Chromium, maybe that's Brave, maybe it's any of the other somewhat alternative browsers that are out there that ostensibly have better security and better privacy settings. As far as Edge is concerned, though, Edge is a very solid browser. Again, because it's built on Chromium, that has some advantages. Since it's built on that Chromium engine, it is going to, at least in some respects, look and feel a little bit like Google Chrome. And of course, Chrome remains the single most commonly used browser that's out there. There are a large number of extensions for the Edge browser, which allow you to add additional functionality that otherwise might not be there. Even though Edge is not widely considered to be the most secure or the most private browser in the world by default, there are certainly settings that you can enable to improve the security and to improve the privacy. One such setting, tracking prevention. We can go in and raise our security and privacy settings inside Edge so that not as much personal or sensitive information is being tracked about us. There are customizable profiles for different users. And Edge is what is now known as a progressive web app, and it does indeed offer an immersive reader experience where you can basically go in and say, get rid of all of the clutter, get rid of all of the ads. Maybe it's a lengthy article or something that you found on the internet and you would just like to read it more or less like a book. You could use that immersive reader experience to make that happen. A couple of disadvantages associated with the Edge browser. The performance, while it's not overwhelmingly slow, it's also not overwhelmingly fast either. Just kind of middle of the road as far as the performance is concerned. And because it's based on that Chromium engine, it very closely resembles in look and in feel Chrome. Now, Chrome and Firefox also both have outstanding performance. Well, if Chrome performs faster than Edge, and there's no real significant difference in the user interface, then it really begs the question, what are the advantages of me using Edge, and do those advantages outweigh the disadvantages? I'm not trying to say you should or should not use Edge. I'm just saying, look, be aware that Edge, as good as it is, isn't significantly better than Chrome, for example. Edge also is not going to be compatible with older hardware, but let's think about that for a moment. That's not really a practical disadvantage because older hardware won't run Windows 11 anyway. Again, if we're thinking computers from 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, they're not going to run Windows 11. They don't have the horsepower as we talked about previously. So in that context, am I really losing anything by running Edge? And the answer would be likely not. It's, again, solid browser. I would just simply say if you're going to take advantage of Edge, if you're going to use it, I would encourage you to investigate and to crank up, if you will, the security and the privacy settings inside Edge. Moving forward, we mentioned earlier, I won't take the time to demonstrate this just in the interest of the little bit of time that we have left, but we did mention the ability to connect directly to Teams. There is an icon on the taskbar. I pointed it out to you earlier. And if you click on that icon, you will be able to jump into Teams for chat and meeting purposes. Now, understand that doesn't open the full Teams experience. It just opens the ability to do chat and to join meetings inside Teams. If you want that full Teams experience, you obviously will need to open Teams separately. It's also important to note that unless you have a Teams account, then opening up the Teams app doesn't really do you very much good, right? You've got to have an account in order to be able to do things inside Teams. Now, recognize you can obtain a free account for Teams, which has outstanding functionality, by the way. In fact, when you start to compare the free version of Teams, perhaps for use by a single person or in a very small business, I think you would find very small businesses, say with under 5, perhaps as many as 10 employees, they would be able to use that free version of Teams very, very well with no charge whatsoever. Certainly, it's not going to have everything that the paid version of Teams has, but it does present a very compelling value proposition for individuals, very small businesses, and perhaps even in some cases, maybe not-for-profit organizations, small not-for-profits, that is. For more information on that, or to perhaps sign up for the free Teams account, I've given you a link there, k2e.fyi, and you can see /Teams sign up is the link. Just be aware that they are out there in case you want them. You can certainly download and utilize them to your heart's content. I would suggest, for example, though, from a business perspective, many of us likely are running Microsoft 365 or Office 365 subscriptions, and or we might also be running Teams subscriptions. And in those circumstances, I think you would find some of these apps, for example, To Do and the List and the Calendar, would all duplicate functionality that is otherwise provided through your Office 365 or Microsoft 365 subscriptions. Features there like Outlook, for example, is going to give you the to-do list. It's going to give you or to-do items followed by a list, and as well as the calendar. I guess the point that I'm trying to get to here is I wouldn't, if I have access to Microsoft 365 or Office 365 subscriptions, and or if I'm using Teams, I don't think I would be as interested in those first three as if I were not using Microsoft 365 or Office 365 or having access to Teams. Some of the other apps, though, could be helpful. For example, a Maps app. You can go download the Maps app and see, obviously, maps similar to if you were using Google Maps or any of the other mapping services out there. The clock could be important, not necessarily to tell time, because after all, you've got the date and time in the lower right-hand corner of your computer screen to begin with. But if you're dealing with multiple time zones, maybe, for example, I'm on Eastern time in the United States and I need to contact someone perhaps in India, and I don't know off the top of my head what the time zone difference is between those two locales. Well, using the clock tool could help me with that. So again, just be aware that those tools are out there. You can search for them and activate them inside Windows 11 and take advantage of them as the situation is conducive. I mentioned earlier that one of the very big upgrades in the team environment is to security. And we've not yet really dealt with the topic of security, so let's spend a few moments talking about the security features in Teams and how you can take advantage of them and why you want to do so. Clearly, I think it's fair to say that in the minds of most business professionals today, security is the number one business concern. And certainly the experience that we've had over the past couple of years dealing with COVID outbreak and all of a sudden people being forced to work remotely, working from home locations or other locations, that has actually only elevated the security risks that are out there. Thinking about it quite simply, how many of our home computers and home Wi-Fi networks, etc., are as secure as the computers and the networks back in our offices, back in our corporate offices? I think we intuitively know the answer to that question, and it's not a pleasant answer given the volume of people who were working from home and, frankly, even who remain working from home. So clearly, security has been, is, and will be a leading concern for us going forward, likely through the rest of all of our careers, no matter at what stage in our careers we happen to be right now. Windows 11 adds in and incorporates many of the principles that are otherwise found in something known as a zero trust security model. Now, I'm not going to say that Windows 11 immediately gives you a zero trust security model, but it does incorporate many of the principles and the features and the security techniques that are otherwise found in zero trust models. Not to turn this into an extended discussion of zero trust models, but just to give you a quick 30,000 foot flyover on what zero trust models are all about. Zero trust models are really focused on 4 key principles. Those principles, as you can see, are endpoint security. That is, we're going to do everything we can to secure the endpoint computers, our desktops, our laptops, our tablets, our smartphones increasingly. Anything that is connecting to the network, we are going to do everything that we can to secure it. We are going to segment our networks and take our corporate-wide network and break it down into multiple sub-networks. For example, maybe in a stereotypical business, we've got our accounting department, we've got our marketing department, we've got our production department, and we've got our HR department. Instead of having one network with no segmentation on it, I would segment that network into an accounting subnet, a marketing subnet, an HR subnet, and a production subnet. That way, if we did have a breach, it would be more difficult for that breach to expand into other subnets than if we did not have the subnets there at all. That is, if we had just one network that had access to everything and we have a breach, then all of a sudden everything is potentially exposed. On the other hand, if we have a subnet and that subnet hits the marketing or the malware or the data breach hits the marketing department, it is going to be challenging to say the least for that breach to expand outside of that subnetwork. We're going to provide what are called least privilege controls to each and every user. Whenever someone logs in, why do they have access? Why should they have access to every one of our applications and every one of our databases? The short answer is they shouldn't. They should only have access to the things, to the databases and to the applications and websites that they need to get their jobs done. And so we're going to restrict to least privilege controls. A good way of thinking about that is if you never have a team member coming to you or coming to your IT staff and saying, hey, I need you to allow me to get into X, Y, or Z over here. When I try to access that application, it tells me I don't have access. If you never have a request for additional access, then it probably means your access is too permissive. So least privilege controls are part of this concept of zero trust security models. And then the last of these 4 principles is identity verification. Every time someone logs in, we are going to verify their identity with strong authentication credentials, user IDs, passwords, facial recognition, fingerprint scans, etc. So we're going to verify their identity, and we are also going to verify that they are logging in from a device that we trust. So we're verifying the identity of the user, but also the identity of the hardware. And we're going to make sure that that hardware is on the pre-approved list of devices that are being allowed to connect. You see, here's the problem. Let's suppose someone on our team loses their laptop. And despite everything we've said, they've taken their username and password and written it down on a sheet of paper on a yellow sticky note, for example, that might be taped to the monitor on the laptop. Well, at that point, anyone who sees the username and the password, they could log in from any device they wanted to, if we're not also verifying the identity of the device. I want to identify the user, but I also want to make sure that that user is logging in from an approved device, an authenticated device. Otherwise, they might be logging in or be able to log in because they somehow ran across the username and password, perhaps for sale on the dark web. So these are the key security features that are associated with the concept of zero trust. Now let's start to see what's going on in the Windows 11 environment that helps to advance these principles. Of 5 things I would say, there's the Trusted Platform module. There is support for Azure-based Microsoft Azure Attestation. There are various new security innovations, such as something called a Pluton security process. We're using secured Core PCs. Remember when we were talking about some of those hardware requirements, and you might have been thinking, why are things like TPM chips required? This is why. All of this TPM chip, Trusted Platform Module, the very first item listed there, all of those, many of those, I should say, hardware requirements to run Windows 11 are indeed, in fact, embodied in these security features that we're running through right now. And then improved authentication options, perhaps using Windows Hello. Diving into this a little bit deeper, what we know, of course, is that the TPM chip is required to run Windows 11. We discussed that previously. The reason that is the case is the TPM chip secures things like the encryption keys and user authentication credentials. In essence, it's encrypting all of that data so that reduces the risk of unauthorized logins. It also reduces the risk of a hacker being able to decipher otherwise encrypted data. So, for example, if we're using a feature, BitLocker, for instance, that's going to somewhat rely on the TPM module in order to encrypt the data. Azure Attestation. This verifies the trustworthiness of various platforms before we access them. Again, Zero Trust security model is all about zero trust. Don't trust anything. Don't trust a device, don't trust an individual, and don't trust a web-based application or network. And in this context, the Azure Attestation verifies the trustworthiness of various platforms before we might reach out and use them. So, for example, if we're going out and accessing some type of cloud-based resource, maybe it's an application, a web service, what have you, the attestation feature is verifying that that resource is secure before it grants access to it. Trust nothing. These various tools that are available now, something like the Pluton, for example, that particular tool, amongst others, could be used to help thwart the risk of a zero-day attack. Zero-day attacks are insidious, their very nature. If you're hit with a zero-day attack, it means that you're hit with some type of cyber attack that no one has ever seen before. You see, if we had seen it before, we would know how to respond. It might be blocked by our anti-malware tools, et cetera, but because we've never seen the zero-day vulnerability or attack before, it's brand new to everyone. And for that reason, zero-day attacks are extremely damaging and expensive. The various new security tools that are inside Windows 11 help to reduce that risk. Secured Core PCs, this is a pretty big deal. Again, if I can ensure that only authorized users can log into our devices, that's a big deal. So this is going, the Secure Core PCs, this is actually a type of a computer where all of the security features are already enabled out of the box. We're not going to rely upon end users or even our IT staffs in some cases to go in and secure the PC. It's done at the factory level and then it's shipped out. Now that could go a long way toward reducing risk in places like healthcare environments or mobile workers or even high-profile industries or high-profile companies. They might be interested in these secured core PCs. The fifth of these options is authentication. Windows 11 devices, particularly using Windows Hello, which is a feature that's been around for a couple of versions of Windows, this goes a long way toward getting us out of a password-driven environment. For example, using Windows Hello, I can log into my Windows computer with fingerprint or with facial recognition. I think most of us would agree passwords are somewhat overdue for replacement. And because we now have, and frankly have had for several years, the Windows Hello feature, we are able to log in to our devices using something other than username and password. Those are some of the new features on security, but that's not to say that there aren't other security features that we shouldn't mention. For example, tools like AppLocker and BitLocker. These probably don't get as much attention perhaps as they should, but they are definitely worthy of conversation today. AppLocker is a form of what we call whitelisting software. Essentially, what that says is AppLocker allows you to create a list of software that is allowed to run on a given computer or group of computers. And anytime anyone tries to run software that is not on that approved list, the software just simply won't run. Now you think, well, okay, what's the use case there? Why would I want to restrict my team members from running software titles? Well, number one, malware. You're certainly not going to go and put a malware load on your AppLocker list, right? So if the malware, even if the malware gets installed onto the computer, it can't run because it's not on the approved list as defined by AppLocker. This will also help to keep unwanted software such as games from being run in your office environments. It could even go so far as to help us conform with software licensing and to ensure that someone is not installing a software title on more devices than what we already have licenses for. To access AppLocker, number one, you must be an administrator, and as an administrator, you can jump in and search for local security policy on your computer. Again, I never bother to remember where these things are anymore. I just use the search button or the search function inside Windows. Search, or inside Windows 11 it is. Search for local security policy and then click and expand out application control policies, and you'll be able to start configuring AppLocker. BitLocker is another tool that's been around for a while. BitLocker is used to help encrypt or to encrypt your hard disk and also USB flash drives. That way, with the hard disk encrypted, even if the device falls into the hands of someone that they should not have access to the device, since the data on the hard disk is encrypted, now we don't have to worry about unauthorized exposure or access to the data. BitLocker is one of the easier tools there is to work with inside the Windows operating system. In fact, let me just quickly go and search for that and show you how you could enable BitLocker instead of popping it in the PowerPoint presentation. Again, I'm just going to hit my search button. Let's close that browser. I didn't mean to open it. My apologies. So I'm going to hit the search button over here on the left-hand side, and it looks like that window opened elsewhere. So I'll have to do this a little bit differently. Let's jump and go this way and just search right up here for BitLocker. So I want to go and manage BitLocker. Again, I have to be an administrator on this computer. You can see that BitLocker is indeed turned on my computer. If it was not turned on, then this turn off button would say turn on BitLocker. I would click the button, it would go through the encryption process, and that's pretty much the end of the story. I won't take the time to encrypt the external drive that I have plugged in right now. It will take a while for that to complete, but basically you can see if I wanted to complete that drive or encrypt that drive, all I would have to say is turn on BitLocker. One of the most effective things you can do to protect unauthorized access to the data. Another feature you should be aware of, I'm going to go quickly here because we're against the clock already. Controlled folder access. This is a great way of protecting your computer from a ransomware attack. We all do recognize that ransomware is a significant business risk these days. With controlled folder access, basically what that tool is going to do is go in and block an unauthorized title, an unauthorized software application from changing files, and by changing, read into that encrypting files. It blocks unauthorized software from changing files in specific folders that you have marked as protected. As we all know, ransomware typically comes in and encrypts all of your data. Well, if controlled folder access sees that there's an application that's not specifically authorized to change data files in your documents folder and your pictures folder and your desktop and any other folders you specifically authorize for protection, it blocks those changes. Once again, this is not a new feature in Windows 11. It's getting a lot more visibility now because of so many of the high-profile ransomware attacks that have occurred recently, but this has actually been in Windows since the fall of 2017. And if we utilize this tool, again, it's preventing files in specific folders from being tampered with by any unknown and therefore potentially risky application. Great, great feature. Like AppLocker, controlled folder access is another form of whitelisting. Basically, if you were just to search for controlled folder access, all you're going to have to do is tick that button that says on, just tick that on, and then name whatever folders you want to be protected. At that point, controlled folder access takes over and does all the heavy lifting for you. We have shared with you what the history of Windows is, kind of the evolution of Windows. We've talked about Windows 11 as an upgrade and what it takes to get into the Windows 11 via the upgrade policy. What are your hardware requirements? What are some of the new features, including things like the Snap Layout, Snap Assist features, including even exposing some features that have been around for a while. For example, the idea that we can utilize Hyper-V to build out the virtual computers. Even going so far as to looking at the widgets as a new feature inside Windows 11, a nice new convenience feature. Moreover, we spent some time talking about security and what the security model in Windows 11 looks like and how it is better. I think most people objectively would say no doubt that it's better, how that security model is better in the Windows 11 environment. I hope that this has given you a good oversight and some good insight into what you should expect in a Windows 11 environment as an end user. Again, your IT staff might have a slightly different perspective just because they're coming at it from a different angle, but these are the things that we felt like were most important from the end user perspective. I thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you joining us, and on behalf of everyone at K2 Enterprises, we look forward to the opportunity of serving you again, hopefully in the very near future. Have a wonderful day.